Well, I mean, simply put, they took my dad away for, long amounts of time from me, and I had a very close bond with my dad. Like we loved going hunting together, going shooting together. He was, and I loved, love. I mean, he's thousands of miles away from me now, but he's alive. um, like doing all that dad shit, working in the garage with him, landscape and busting ass, renovating a house together, whatever it was. I've got a very very close relationship with my dad.
Welcome to How I Embraced the Suck, a podcast where you get to hear from veterans what life in the military is really like. I am your host, Walt, and before we start, you should know that I do not censor the show in any way. You have been warned.
The worst part of the Southwest.
Oh, New Mexico?
Oh yeah.
Really? Yeah, I bet.
That's why we tested the first nuke there. We're like, that's New Mexico.
If it goes wrong, we won't. It's not that big of a loss.
Yeah, no one's even gonna know for like at least a month or two.
Right. Cool. Well, yeah. Well, today we got BR. I'm actually pretty ecstatic. BR is the artist behind the show artwork, and also a first in several things. He's the first foreigner, so not even a real American.
Yep.
He's the first guy to attend a military college, and he's the first to wash out of the military.
Whoa.
Okay, all right.
Wash out and walk away are very different. It's
true.
very hard to wash out of the military, as I've learned.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll lighten that a little bit and say the first to walk away. Well, actually, no, that's not true because I've talked to a few who have chosen to walk away. So great. Now I got to redo the whole intro. No.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, as you may have noticed, from the accent, BR's from Africa. No, I'm kidding. He's from England. And yeah, so tell us your kind of your military background there, or your you went to what, the College of Slapton Sands, you said?
Slapton Sands. So royal. You're gonna make me all prim and proper when I don't give a fuck anymore. But
the Battle of Slapton Sands. Yeah. Never mind.
Killer. All right. So I went to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst to commission as an officer in the British Army, and that was after growing up as a military kid, and my dad was in the military for over 25 years. So very much ingrained in the military culture, and I thought that was just going to be a part of my life. I thought I was going to go in. I didn't plan on having a military career because there was other stuff I wanted to do, but I did want to go in and just have that experience because I felt like I needed it as some kind of qualifier at the time. And so my dad was regular enlisted, very ordinary kind of middle class family, and so I was a little bit out of place at Sandhurst because there's ordinary people there. Like the people I got along with most were some Northern Irish lads, loyalists, I'm sorry to say. But they were like the coolest there because they weren't from a very privileged background. And whereas most of my classmates they were from very wealthy families.
Oh, sure.
I think I don't really know much about West Point or like American military officers. I haven't spoken to many, and I guess I should. But I'm interested to see the parallels because at Sandhurst, so many were just stuck up posh little twats. They were like so Sandhurst, to give people some perspective, both of the princes, the royalty went through there. Prince Harry and Prince William, they both commissioned as officers.
Okay.
Winston Churchill went through there. What's his face guy who wrote James Bond? Is it Ian Fleming, something like that?
Yeah. Yep.
He went through there. So there's all sorts of, it's got some prestige, and it's known throughout, worldwide for being a place to get good, solid leadership training. And so,
Sure.
my dad was enlisted, and I thought, you know,
One up the old man.
well, there's not. So I really disliked officers, and I learned to growing up because
Mm,
they were fucking pricks. They didn't look after their guys, and it was down to the
sure.
NCOs and stuff to look after their people, and that's what my dad did. Whether it was good for his career or not, he always looked after his guys, and that was
Hmm.
so fucking important to me in the military. And so I, as a young idealistic dude, I thought, you know, officers need to be more like that, and the organization's fucked because it's just a bunch of posh people leading poor people, and that's a really old-fashioned dynamic. It needs to change. I have an
Sure.
opportunity
Sure.
because of all my dad's hard work. I had an opportunity to do the college thing, get my degree, or uni. I'm very Americanized, so if someone catches me saying some Americanisms, it's because I've been over in the States for a few years. But we'll
Right.
get to that. But yeah, I thought I could go in and make a difference, make a change, and I would go in and be the guy who understood, the regular army dudes, and I would look out for them. And because I didn't want to be in for
Mm,
20 years, I thought I could go
sure.
in, be like a good lieutenant, good captain maybe, and then get out and carry on with my regular career.
Right. Right.
And that
You weren't
and
looking to like single-handedly turn the whole army around, but
Oh
just make an
fuck no,
impact.
no, no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
because and here's the interesting thing. I don't know how deep we want to get into the political side. I'll stick to more just the military stuff. But I was
Yeah.
I was definitely I grew up very neoconservative, just of my own accord. Not my family didn't give a fuck about politics really.
Hmm.
I just personally was a bit more neoconservative. I thought the war was a good thing, blah blah blah, fighting bad guys and stuff, and all that. And then as I got into uni, I became a bit more libertarian, but like very, conservatarian, whatever you want to call it. And so I was skeptical
Sure.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
government, and I thought we should be fighting the right wars, and that kind of those baby steps. And so
Sure. Sure.
going into this thing, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna. My goals were to go in and be the officer who makes little changes that have maybe a little bit of an impact that maybe spreads over time. And after I've had my time in, so there's less government waste. We're fighting the right wars. I thought there would be some kind of push. I wouldn't single-handedly change things, but maybe influencing others, talking to other people, my peers, I could kind of push that kind of
Sure.
change.
Yeah.
Very idealistic, very hopeful, and then I started to spend some time, at Sandhurst and uh, talking to instructors, and I gradually learned that's not quite what the military was. not
Right.
not a system that was open to change, especially not the British military, which I feel like the American military, while also not being open to change, it's it's not stagnant with like century old traditions, and like there's
Sure.
people that wear fucking feathers on their caps and all sorts of silliness in the British Army. It's
Right.
it's not a place that's open to change,
Right.
shall we
Right.
say. um so I don't know, anything you wanna touch on any of that before I delve any deeper?
Yeah, yeah. I was curious. One thought I had: the how do you get into it? Like here in the, like you're saying for West Point, I think I know there's several different routes by which an individual can go there. What's the process to get into Sandhurst?
Oh, there are so many. I think there's even a number
Okay.
of ways for privileged people to, like, foreign people can come in and get officer training. Like at one
Okay.
point there was a president of Pakistan who was trained at Sandhurst, and there's um all sorts of ways to get that prestige without doing the whole thing. So
Okay.
it's
Sure.
interesting because it's, while it is a part of the military, it's also it seems to be, I guess, a bit more open than that. I haven't got a fucking clue how that works, but
Okay.
it's there's a lot of ways in. So there's ways you can go in and get the training while you're at college. You can sign up for the full 44-week course with terms, 3 terms, and you get leave in between. And so for me, I was doing while I was at uni, I was also doing that stuff. But I was
Okay.
so I was doing kind of weekend warrior shit like a reservist. But then
Sure.
if I had to concentrate on college, like my second term, I just did the full class. It's weird. It's very
Okay.
modular, and there's all sorts of ways to kind of phase in and phase out and stuff. It's
Sure.
interesting to say the least.
Yeah. 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 Like I know, excuse me, in America, if someone's given the Congressional Medal of Honor, their kids, if they qualify the requirements, scholastic and everything, they can get into any of the military colleges. They can just
Hmm.
bypass, like I think, like your senator can let you go or whatever. But if your
Oh, of
parent
course.
has a Congressional Medal of Honor, you can just jump right in. So interesting.
And that's part of the
Yeah.
problem with these kind of colleges is that whole thing of prestige and
Sure.
bloodlines and names and stuff, because all that shit matters.
Right.
And my name didn't mean a damn thing at
Right.
at Sandhurst,
Yeah.
and so it was like, and I didn't give a shit. It was almost a point of pride for me,
Mm-hmm.
to be an ordinary person at Sandhurst. It definitely was a point of pride, but
Right. Right.
um. I'm thinking retroactively now that I don't care. I don't care, but at the time, no,
You're
it
there
was a
rubbing like coal on your face to emphasize your humble origins.
yeah. I'm just just a
Right.
regular lad, but no, it just being surrounded by a bunch of posh people, yeah, very odd stuff. But
Yeah.
so yeah,
So
oh
so
where do you want to go?
what was the environment like? Was it similar to the university that you were going to, or was it, or uni, excuse me, or was it um I mean, obviously it was more military. What was it like compared to your regular university?
So it was like, because we were all students, we'd all been doing the uni thing. So we're still in that mindset, still binge drinking, and that there's we had officers like drinks and stuff, and we'd go and hang out and like
Hmm.
do. There was I think Sandhurst does a good job of encouraging socialization to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
So we had drinks together and stuff, and there'd be kind of recreational like drunk army games and shit where you were like doing kind of half PT stuff while you're 8 whiskeys deep. So
Sure. Sure.
and that kind of helped knock down the barriers between myself and some of the other people. But there was always still that there was a few divides. So there's a lot more of a palpable class system in Britain. You can very much tell if someone's posh or if someone's uh
Okay.
like council waller or whatever you'd say, like somebody lives in like council housing, or
Right.
even middle class is just kind of like, well, you're not, you don't have all that money,
Mm-hmm.
like there's a pretty stark difference in just how people live and how they talk and all that kind of thing. And obviously as you're going through training, you're doing your basic soldier in, and you're getting muddy together and all that shit. It helps, and you're drinking together and sitting next to each other in class.
Mm-hmm.
These things started to get knocked down a little bit, but there was still, you always knew some people would have more prestige than you just because of where they came from. So that's
Right.
that
Sure.
was an odd thing. And I didn't really mind it, but it was there and it was a factor, and I did prefer to associate with people who were more normal, because I wasn't the only ordinary person in the class. There was plenty of people who came from regular middle class backgrounds and stuff, but I'd say it was like 50-50, like ordinary people and very very posh people.
Right. Right. Hmm.
uh trying trying to think where to go from there. I'm just gonna get bogged down like bitching about something.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I guess one question, having had that experience, I guess not so much. You didn't spend as much time with vets there. Obviously, you were. Although I
Well,
assume your
well,
instructors were. Yeah.
that was something. My instructors were so it's odd. Like all the practical, useful stuff enlisted guys would teach us, which I you know really liked because they were fucking real people.
Right.
And then these cartoon characters, the officers, would teach us for the most part. I say that just because of one guy in particular, but they would cover more the academic side and all the snooze fest stuff, and more
Sure.
lead it. We had a few cool guys. We had one guy come in because I was there around the 2016 period, and we had a Royal Marine commander of some description. I forget his name. Somewhere in a notepad. Came in to talk to us about the coalition forces in Syria and how much of a shit show it was, and he did like a whole presentation on that. So we'd occasionally have guys come in and give us like real world useful information, and then
Sure.
who were officers. We have the enlisted would teach us all the practical bushcraft skills and like soldiering and all that kind of thing,
Right.
and then so we had this one, I think he was a major, who looked like the Monopoly man. He was fucking ridiculous. And this is where the first time I had him as not instructor, but like lecturer, I guess.
Uh
The first time I had him, I was like, no fucking way this dude exists. So he was like around 5 foot, like Danny DeVito kind of height.
Oh
Or
wow.
and he was like balding on top, wearing his little beret, and he had a monocle.
Oh, he did. Oh,
He had a fucking monocle, and that's when I was like, that was the first monocle I'd seen in real life that wasn't part of a costume, and I was like,
right.
holy shit, these people
Right.
exist. And he had this Monopoly Man mustache. It was just the wildest fucking thing. Because he did
Wow.
not look real. He looked like he should be wearing one of those little British explorer hats, fighting the boas or
Right.
something. It was
Right.
what
Right.
balls. I don't even know how you fucking pronounce it. That's how common as muck I am. But
You-
yeah.
You're
So
you're concerned that Hasbro is going to contact him for a copyright violation?
yeah, his existence is a copyright violation. He
Wow.
he was, and so at first he seemed like this cutesy little dude to me. I was like, oh, that's adorable. That's the British
Right.
Army. He's like kind of old world dude. But this guy, he was the personification of that old world, like British Empire kind of
Yeah.
military,
Sure.
and it's like prideful in every conflict we'd ever been involved in. Everything was just divine. The British could do no wrong, and
Sure. Yep.
I think there's so many lessons to learn from military history, looking back and be like, oh no, we were the bad guys in that, particular conflict, or whatever. I think there's so much to learn just being honest. But he
At
was
least
this.
improvement to learn.
Oh
Improvement to be
yeah,
gained. Yeah. Yeah.
at
For
the
sure.
very least. But he had this like fairy tale kind of, um,
Mm.
like I don't know quite how to put it, like fairy tale retroactive
Ro-
memory of every
Rose-colored
British.
glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's what us
and
Americans would say.
Oh yeah, no. It's a good term for it. He was very much like, oh, the sun will never set on the British Empire kind of dude.
Sure.
And I,
Sure.
and I was like, oh fuck, these guys exist. How many
Right.
are in the army still?
Right.
How many are in charge of us? And
Right.
I was like, I came to learn it was more than I was particularly comfortable with. So that was the start of my kind of hesitation with this whole thing. I was like, okay, so I'm trained to become an officer, and these guys actually exist. It's not just like ignorance; it's outright
Sure.
pride in what I would call disastrous fuck ups and mistakes on the British government and British military. And he was just sitting
Right.
there like, oh, it's all glorious. Yeah, it's like, ugh, what a bad flavor in my mouth.
Huh.
And so that was that was an eye opener very early on, and the more I came into contact, the more lectures I had from him and stuff like that, the more I kind of those ideas developed. But then learning under the enlisted, they were a lot of fun. they were the people that I wanted.
Right.
I wanted to be able to help out those guys, the real fucking people. If I when I became an officer, so I paid lots of attention to them.
Mhm.
I'd ask questions that no one else would ask about, like, like what would you want an officer to do in this situation? Like, what would you hope like a
Sure.
new
Sure.
officer would do with this? And everyone just looked at me like, a lot of my
Right.
peers would look at me like, why the fuck would you care what they think?
Well, and you're
Kind
you're
of.
coming at it from these are senior enlisted guys. They know what's up. Like
Oh,
we're
for
here to
sure, for
learn.
sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
your goal is to benefit them. So,
yeah. Like
yeah,
my
we're interesting.
instructors. Yeah, my instructors had, they'd been to Afghan and Iraq and fucking Ireland. Some of them had
Mhm.
been in the Falklands. It was,
Oh, wow.
uh, yeah, yeah. It was a very
That
mixed.
was that 82? I think.
Yeah, so that was more the like the older officers
Okay,
who
sure,
had
sure.
like Falklands experience, but a lot of my enlisted instructors had spent time in Ireland, and I was like, that also didn't sit right with me because I was like, ooh, and
Right.
there's this one training ground called Stanta, and so there's all sorts of mock villages and structures and stuff dotted around this big desolate bit of British countryside where artillery does training and infantry, and you do land nav, and all sorts of like exercises happen on this big bit of training ground.
Okay.
And there's still Irish villages set up.
Oh,
Like,
at like practice mock
yeah,
villages?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
I did some CQB stuff in mock Irish villages,
Wow.
which also I was like, it sat really fucking strange with me.
Mhm.
Just because I was
Sure.
like, can we accept some of this stuff is very wrong, some of our history is wrong, but things like that, as I
Hmm.
started to, I'd make little comments, not thinking anything of it, to like, my peers, and they would just look at me like I was an alien. And there was lots of this because I, another kind of buffer between myself and my peers was I was basically the only person who was into firearms more than just, oh, I like it when we get to shoot. I was always a shooter. Like, I'd grown
Sure.
up shooting,
Sure.
which is really uncommon in England. I grew up, shooting a suppressed 22 and deer rifles and shotguns, but as a young kid, I often thought, why can't we have handguns? Why can't we have ARs? Things like this. I just didn't, just from a childish curiosity, I didn't get why we didn't have the same, like, why it was an issue. I don't want to hurt
Right.
anyone.
Right.
I'm responsible. I even have, my fucking firearm certificates. A cop's come into my house and seen where my gun safe is, and
Right.
they have a fucking doctor's note saying I'm sane. Why can I not have an AR-15, which
Right.
shoots,
Right.
a similar caliber to what my deer rifle shoots? Things like that. And I believed in being able to carry for self-defense and all sorts of things, just kind of by happenstance as a young kid, because I grew up shooting. And I guess as someone of my generation, I was watching more, YouTube gun people, and like, why can't we have that here? And so I
Sure.
would talk about this kind of stuff to my peers, thinking, oh, well, we're all gun people, right? We're all,
Right. Right.
like signing up for the military. Um, and I was just met with stone faces. Like, I mean, guns are cool, man. But I was like, what? Okay, I thought I was joining like a smaller part of our culture where I'd be surrounded by more like-minded people, and
For
people just
sure.
didn't give a fuck about those things. And I was like, okay, well, we, you guys aren't really. I don't know. I wasn't on the same level as them and same mindset, and little things like that kept on cropping up, and I was like, that's fucking odd. I thought this would be where I'd find, kind of like-mindedness and camaraderie and all that kind of stuff that a lot of young guys join the military for. But
Yeah.
I found ultimately, even once we had that military mindset driven into us, we were still very different.
Hmm.
Which is fine, individualism and all that. But I wasn't finding the community I had in part gone looking for.
Sure. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And I think that's something a lot of young guys do. They think just joining the military will, you know, kind of course you'll make friends. I mean, you know, misery loves company, but it's it's not quite the same as finding your tribe, you know. And I think so many people make that mistake when they join they think the military is just like a tribe that has officers in every strip mall parking lot across the country, you know, and you can just go and find your like-minded
Sure.
people just, you know, walking into an office. But there's so much more to finding your tribe than that is why I would say, and what I learned kind of just in our downtime, and kind of what my interests were compared to a lot of my peers, and my outlook on things.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. I was curious when you were mentioning stuff when you were in those mock Irish villages and everything, and you'd mentioned something about Ireland, or are we sure we want to do this? Was there a difference in the response of your peers who were from England as opposed to the ones you mentioned that were from North Ireland?
Oh no! So the Northern Irish, it's kind of sad because my Irish mates were the people I was the absolute closest to
Mm-hmm.
in during my training. I fucking love those lads so much. I still chat with them every now and then, but they are absolutely fucking brainwashed. They truly think there was, you know, Ireland had no right to secede, or to it has no right to um sovereignty. You know, they think
Sure, it
they've
should be all one under the UK.
yeah, and
Okay.
they are so offended by if I made a joke about the monarchy, like just not being terribly which was kind of my edgelord coming out during training. I'd say like the odd disparaging
It was
thing.
very on brand.
Oh, for sure, always, always.
Yeah.
I you know I was an interesting personality type for the military, but yeah, I would just say shit for shock value, thinking, you know, what of it, and then people would be offended, and the Northern Irish, would be a little bit upset, and I'm like, what the fuck? So, so sorry, what was the question
Yeah.
again? I'm worried I'm like missing
Oh,
some
just
of it.
the difference in their reaction, and you pretty much touched on it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
it sounds like they were almost more offended if you questioned um, training to go fight
Yes.
in Ireland itself.
They're very prideful of the Union Jack, of being British, not Irish. You know,
Mm,
they're fucking Northern
sure.
Irish, and they're loyalists, and they're very proud of that stuff. But they, you know, British is something that they consider having fought for, you know.
Right. Right.
So, as I became more disillusioned, and they were kind of getting that dogma driven into them and being more open to it, there was kind of this, uh, you know, I'm thinking that Fast and Furious meme where Paul Walker drives off. They're driving down the highway, and Vin Diesel and Paul Walker
Right.
kind of split.
Right. Right.
I was noticing this divide between us. I was like, ah, fuck, I'm losing you.
Yep.
You know, like
Yeah.
still love them dearly as people, but just mindset wise, very different to me.
Huh. Yeah, that makes sense though, because the more you're in it, your reaction is just gonna be exacerbated, whether you accept it or turn from it.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. Huh.
and so something else that was happening during all of this was I was still getting my drip feed of gun culture from Instagram and stuff. So around this time, I was kind
Right.
of lurking more libertarian leaning, even anarchist politics on Instagram, and also gun culture, and all of those things were kind of combining in that space on Instagram, and I was learning more about these things, and you know, individual rights and self
Mm-hmm.
ownership and all that kind of stuff that was, and even anti-war stuff,
Mm-hmm.
anti-police, so many different things. And while I was going through what should be, you know, pounding me into the perfect square peg for the British Army's purposes, but instead I was like, I was meeting things with more resistance than I think I ideally should have. And I think that's part. It's kind of a funny modern change because obviously we have, you know, mobile phones now,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I think Sandhurst treats you like an adult, which I respect. In a lot of ways, they treat you very adult. So I still had access to a lot of this information. I was still getting that drip feed of this counter kind of
Gotcha.
narrative while I was meant to be, solely on this single narrative. And so,
Right,
so
right.
that was something. I might be the only person who's gone through Sandhurst and gotten radicalized in a different way as I was going through my training into especially like more radical libertarian politics for sure. I'm sure there's
Hmm.
probably some crackpot socialist that's come out of Sandhurst, but um but
Right.
I'm sure there's a lot.
I think
But
they all joined MI5 back in the 50s and 60s.
yeah, yeah. What
Huh.
a dreadful fucking organization. But yeah. So I kept on going through this thing, and I realized about halfway through I suddenly had um the real question, like, oh, am I gonna do this?
Hmm.
And I was like, oh fuck, now it's a question, not just a little doubt. And it was never a doubt in like, oh, this
Right.
is so hard and all that, because a lot of factors like, having an enlisted dad and not having all of that prestige other people did. I fucking chucked myself into my training. I it, beat myself up pretty good just trying to excel. And
Right.
in I was definitely not like some top of the class dude. There was, a lot sharper guys than me, but I wasn't slacking by any means. I was doing very good, and having a good time, honestly, with the training. That was the stuff I'd want. It was like what I'd wanted to do my whole life, because I'd avoided doing the child cadet thing. Do you know the how the British Army does like baby cadets basically?
My only connection is like Royal Navy midshipmen back in the day, where a kid would come onto the ship and just do all the work and learn the ropes and everything, literally. So
Oh,
no,
okay. So
yeah,
so
hit
in
me.
Britain, basically. Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
So basically, instead of having like a Boy Scouts kind of program, I'm sure there's shit like that bobbing about,
Oh, okay,
but
sure, sure.
that you can do like pretty solid training as a child in Britain. Like the cadets, I forget how young they are, but there's like very very young kids doing like, bushcraft and um uh like, I think they do battle drills and shit like that. They certainly carry like SA-80s and things like that. I think it's probably inherited from the whole Dad's Army, thing from World War II, where it's like a kind of national readiness
So,
thing.
so kind of like ROTC meets Boy Scouts, kind of
Yes, yeah,
ish.
yeah.
Okay,
Very very young kids in full uniform, doing it as like a youth club kind of deal. And
okay, sure.
and then civilians, not military, teaching them, but they would dress up like soldiers, which is very odd.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I,
I
I
don't.
think I think
Hmm.
usually I don't know if they were usually reservists, but to my knowledge, they could be outright civilians just doing it.
Hmm.
I might be
Sure.
wrong on that, because I never did it, because as a young kid growing up military, I was rebellious and I was like, "Oh, that's fucking
Right.
dorky. I don't want to do that." Even though in my heart I was like, "That would be so fun to go and play in the woods with my friends with fucking rifles and kit. That's
Right.
all I want to be
Right.
doing." But
But I'm too
but
cool.
but I'm too cool, and the military is the worst thing in my life. Fuck them.
Right.
It's funny how I circled. I started that way, and then I was like, no, I'm an adult now. I like the military. And then as an adult, I circled back to fuck the military. But hey ho. So yeah, so a lot of my peers had experience with that or something, and it was some of the Northern Irish lads had that, and the instructors would bully them. They're like, like if you had any gear that wasn't issued, they would just assume that you were a baby cadet, and
Oh yeah.
they would bully you for it. But God, what was my reason for going down this rabbit hole? Effectively, you can have military training in a large facet of ways in England. You
Okay.
can go the cadet route, and fuck, where was I going to go with that?
I have to admit I forgot also.
God damn it! I knew this would happen at some point. We made it like 40 minutes without me fucking up too bad.
I feel like Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny just ran down the rabbit hole, and I'm just standing there like,
that's
I
yeah.
don't know.
That's usually my podcast. Fuck.
Well, one thing you mentioned, that you didn't care for the military as a kid, but then you grew to. What was it about, or why was it as a kid that you didn't care for the military or want to be in it?
Well, I mean, simply put, they took my dad away for long amounts of time from me, and I had a
Sure.
very a very close bond with my dad. Like we loved going hunting together, going shooting together. He was and I loved love. I mean, he's thousands of miles away from me now, but he's alive.
Sure. Yeah.
Doing all that dad shit, working in the garage with him, landscape and busting ass, renovating a house together, whatever it was. I've got a very very close relationship with my dad, and so but the military would take him away. So I was never like, oh fuck my dad. I was like, fuck the military. It's just his job. It's how he's
Right.
putting food on the table. But sending him off to the desert or sending him, God knows where for 6 months, a year, whatever it might be, and it's just like, and the military, made my mum a single mum for long periods of time, and that's
Right.
really fucking rough. I've got one younger sibling, so I was like the kind of second parent when I got a little bit older, just to help out, be the man of the house. My mom's got a bad back, so I had to step up and kind of help out with lifting shit as a pretty young kid when my dad wasn't around, and I just always had that extra responsibility. So I mean, you could write fucking books on the child psychology of military kids. We are a very fucked up people, but
right.
There's so many kids act out, and I think I was very lucky with my upbringing. My family we're still very close, still a lot of love for each other, but so many devolve into fighting, and you see it, stateside too. So many families get fucked up by people rushing in to marriage or like unplanned kids and just the wrong fucking person, bad decisions, financial shit, divorce. But as long as my dad's military career was, we have come out very fucking good. I'm just an anarchist. That's like the worst thing that's happened to us.
Right.
But honestly, I think they're on their way now too with all the bullshit going on in the world. But so yeah, like I think when I thought I was quote unquote maturing, and I figured to kind of qualify my interest in firearms, I went to college, and in my ignorance, being a country boy, I would talk about shooting like it was a fairly, like it was a normal thing, because it is. But not in Britain, and not in uni. Because it's a little bit more liberal there, and they don't care for guns. And so
so did that set you aside as like somebody just you were odd, you had a different interest, or
more
along the lines of we need to be concerned about this guy and what
no I was never like I was never like school shooter list, but like, because people, I was never like a weirdo. I was otherwise I'd like to say very charming and lovely to most people I interacted with, and social enough that I wasn't like some kind of trench coat wearing oddity, although I was wearing patched up jackets, and spikes and shit, but not trench coats. So
it was just yet another factor in your unique oddities.
Yeah, it was like, what the fuck is up with this guy? But so yeah, I realized God, I'm gonna lose myself again. So I realized being a civilian shooter in Britain, like having an interest in guns as a civilian, as an adult, like it was fine when I was a young kid and I was going hunting with my dad and I was attending, like rural schools and stuff. There was a bit more of an understanding for it, because everyone knew, like, someone's granddad would have a shotgun for pheasants or whatever it might be. Someone would know a deer hunter. But when I started going to my uni, that was less prevalent, and I didn't quite expect that. And so all of a sudden I was like, oh great, so now I'm like my mates would always joke, "Oh yeah, you know," and BR likes guns, and like that was my
Right,
personality to them if they were making a joke or some shit. I'm like, oh
right,
fuck off, you know. So I realized I needed some kind of qualifier in the world's eyes to be interested in firearms, and so and and also at the same time, I had various kind of, like what I was talking about with the whole Mustang or Mustang Junior mentality, where the son of an enlisted guy, uh, going
right.
in and trying to do right by the regular dudes. But so there was that, and then on the firearms side, I was like, cool, I'll do a few years of military stuff, and that'll qualify me to. Oh, also at the same period, I was working for a gun shop owned by a ex-British Army sniper,
Got
and
okay, sure.
and so his qualifier, being an ex-British Army sniper, is why he was running a successful, gun
Right.
business in the UK. And I was like, I think that was probably a big influence. Like, oh, I've got to have this thing as a qualifier to be a legit gun guy in Britain, because
Right.
otherwise you're
You
just,
saw a route to success.
well, not necessarily success, because like it was more just like, instead of just being an oddity, it was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, there's a reason he's into guns, and I was like, I felt like I had to
Gotcha.
have that for some reason just to be accepted
Mm-hmm.
by larger society. I'm not just a weirdo that was into guns. It's like, oh no, he knows his way around them because of the military.
Right. Right. Sure.
And so that kind of cocktail of reasons is why I was like, oh. And then at like my, they call it a freshers fair at the start of uni. All of the freshers, all the new kids,
Mm-hmm.
they have these things, trying to get you into all the societies and sports and stuff. And there was a thing there about essentially British ROTC, and I was like, well, something to do. Oh, and a second earlier, someone had passed me a pamphlet to join the Marxist Society, and I was like, the what society? They're like, Marxist, and I was like, ugh. And I walked like 6 feet to the right, and ROTC handed me a pamphlet, and I'm like, there we go, that's the ticket. Dumb fuck. But yeah, so that's how that saga really began, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the whole me finding my way into thinking, oh, I'm actually going to do the military thing, was literally a fuck you to some college socialists. So
Right.
thank you, Marx Society, for wasting my time, you fucks. But that's how that began. Uh,
Huh. Um. I don't think I asked this. The here in the I'm pretty sure I haven't. Here in the U.S. There's vets are kind of venerated.
oh
I think
yes.
maybe as a response to the treatment from Vietnam. I'm not sure exactly, but I'm just assuming.
No, I
Is
I think that's probably likely.
is that the same in Britain? Is
Fuck no.
there a similar? Are they looked down on, or expound on
so
that?
we have fuck, what do we call it? I think it's called Remembrance Day. I'm so fucked up now between talking to.
With the poppies.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So we it's an odd thing because no one talks about the military in Britain until it's Remembrance Day, and then no
Okay,
one talks about the military until next year. If you're a civilian, that's the only time you're thinking about the military, unless you
sure.
see a guy in uniform running into Tesco's, one of our supermarkets for a fucking sandwich or some shit. Yeah, you see it
Okay,
like out where I'm from, East Anglia. There's a lot of air bases, and so you'll always see like RAF lads, like gunning about in uniform,
sure.
doing civilian shit, just like you see army and otherwise doing over here. Apart from Marines, I think they're the only ones who can't do that shit, but in in Britain, it seems for the most part, Air Force are most likely to do that, and Army will sometimes do it. But there's,
Okay,
I think British culture is funny. We are a very um, reserved people, and not in that like Victorian sexless way. We're just a bit more private, a bit
sure.
quieter.
Yeah,
Um, and so if you're military, it's not like, it is your personality, but you don't tell anyone about your personality. If you get me,
sure.
it's a
I
similar
see what you're saying.
a similar thing. Like they're still fucking nutcases, as I'm sure anyone sharing any experience about British Army guys, they're fucking sickos for the most part. Like just lunatics, and but that's very private. Like the British public does not encounter that side of the British Army unless they're unfortunate enough to meet 6 to 8 of them in a pub late at night and say
Sure.
some shit about them. But
Yep.
for the most
Yeah.
part, society, they're just completely ignorant of them. It's not like a big part of our culture. It's not like there's none of that hero worship really, apart from on Remembrance Day, when all of a sudden it's like the most important thing in the world, and it's like this weird silent competition in public. People will start putting on poppies like a month before Remembrance Day,
Sure.
and because
Okay.
like kind of the official thing is when you see the BBC news anchors put on their poppy and start wearing it for like
Right.
2
Right.
weeks prior to Remembrance Day and maybe a week after. But people would just wear them for fucking ages, and it,
Hmm.
so the whole thing, poppies grew in the fields of a lot of battlefields after World War I, and it was
Right.
like after all the bloodshed and all of the the landscape fucking destroyed by shelling and all of the and trenches and stuff, you would see these landscapes, be covered with blood red poppies as
Right.
far as the
Right.
eye could see across Europe and in Britain, and
Hmm.
it is a very impactful thing to see, just because of
Oh
the
yeah.
meaning it's been given.
Oh, for
Now,
sure.
it's gorgeous without
Loads
the
of
meaning.
emotion, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and so knowing people who've lost family and stuff to in Afghan and all sorts, and then I don't know, it still fucking gets me, honestly. Like just
Yeah.
seeing, you think about the amount of bodies left in fields for fucked up conflicts that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Seeing a whole field of blood red, oof,
Yeah.
it's a lot. And so
Well, yeah. This last Christmas Eve, I saw. There's a story of the 1914 Christmas Eve truce and all that, and I
yeah,
saw that. Was it a chocolate company or something in Britain made that ad?
Cadbury's maybe.
It wasn't Cadbury's. It was some company I never heard of, but
Hmm.
um, it was in 2014, so 100 years after the
Yeah,
occurrence. It seemed, my impression was they have a Christmas ad every year about different stuff, and this one was 100 years after the Christmas truce, so they made it about that. Just a
yeah,
real short little, and of course the soldiers share chocolate and everything, but like that got to me. That got me emotional, just seeing the stupid ad about soldiers in the middle of killing each other, and then all of a sudden one guy pops his head up above the trench and he's risking his life to be like, hey, it's Christmas Eve and all that. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
hang on. you know
Well,
so
well, that's
I can
the
understand.
wild thing. Like, I don't know. There's no, when you're going through the process at Sandhurst, like, there's no
Uh-huh.
talk about that side of things. There's no like, you don't talk about
Mm,
really the humanity of war,
yeah. Yep.
which is a really disturbing thing because I don't know. I think it's an important part of the education to understand. Like, is this a righteous war? Because if it is, let's like, surely it should be that obvious, and we should be able to defend it. But
Sure.
it's just not even part of the conversation. And so to get back to your question, uh, like the British public, for the most part, even usually very liberal people will wear a poppy for a little bit. Very, very like, I guess, no, I'm definitely not going to bestow the title of anarchist or anything on them, but more just your regular like commies and that kind of shit. Or the
Hmm.
more radical lefty types will outright, they'll chuck away reefs during that season. They'll they won't
Sure.
wear one, which is this big societal sin, and I
Right.
believe in their right to protest war and shit. But it is kind of a fucked up thing where the only good the only visible sign of anti-war protesting you'll see in Britain is just these fucking assholes desecrating memorials to the dead
Right.
soldiers themselves instead of
Right.
any actual like ballsy anti-war shit. And I'm like how fucking gutless. So, and there's a lot of that where the only time you see these guys is during this time, and so it's people don't, they're not like, they won't go out of their way to defend the military or anything, but it's just kind of like
Yeah.
Brits are very hive mindish in their opinions, like liberal or conservative. When you get from the micro and out to the macro, you kind of see they're pretty overlapping in that country. There's really nothing that distinguishes them to me these days. Like
Sure.
they're the same people, and so when it comes to like memorial stuff like that, most people are pretty reasonable and respectful. Whereas kind of like I guess you have the Democrats trying out the hero worship these days. Like, oh, this vet said that he hates AR-15s. It's a weapon of war, and they try and
Right.
capitalize on that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, there's definitely not that in Britain, but occasionally to rile up the conservatives, it'll be like, oh, this 86-year-old Royal Marine Commando was like spat on or whatever the fuck, and it'll
Right.
be like a 3-week news story. So it is odd. I think the only time the military is thought of by the public in Britain is when there's an issue to push, and that's a fucking shame. And you
Mm.
see it reflected in the quality of their bases. Like I've been on American bases, I've seen American bases, and they're fucking beautiful. There's landscaping, and
Mm.
the
Sure.
roads are all like by and large. If there's like proper military installations where you've got families and stuff living on them, they are very proper. Like the facilities are very good. There's places that'll fucking poison you with the water, but like there's money
Right.
invested in these places, because there's so much hero worship in this country, and because if you didn't treat them right, you would get in a lot of fucking trouble. But in Britain,
Yeah.
you'll drive past an army base and the fence is like dilapidated and rusting, and the buildings are all just these sad, stark brick buildings. The housing is pretty fucking poor, by and large. It's a very depressing place. It's like there's a lot, reconstruction after the Second World War in Britain and all of the bombing.
Mm. Sure.
There was a big overhaul of like government housing, government building, just to house people and to get the country running again. And we're relying on a lot of that infrastructure still, with like only modernized in the 80s or something. And
Uh-huh.
so a lot of the housing, a lot of the facilities, the bases, they are some of the most depressing parts of the UK I've ever fucking seen.
Interesting.
So like the military is thought of, like I said, when there's an issue to push, when it's time to like a policy push, it'd be like, oh, look at how we're treating them, blah blah blah, we need this money, and then it doesn't go anywhere, and no one follows up to ask if the money was spent right, and that's that.
Sure. Yep.
So that's kind of how the military and the public, uh, you know, interact in
Huh.
Britain.
Huh. Yeah. Here in the U.S., a lot of vets will tell you, for example, if you say, "Hey, thank you for your service," or whatever, a lot of them will say, or at least think, even if they don't say it, it was just a job. It wasn't, etc.
Yeah,
But in public perception, there's a lot of there's kind of an assumption that it's more than a job. It's a
duty.
sacrifice. It's honorable and something to be glorified. Is
Yeah.
that the case over in Britain? Do they look at it, if they see a soldier, are they like, well, he's just doing a job, or do they see that as something to be venerated?
So Brits don't venerate very much. We,
Okay.
but
Okay.
which is interesting. Like, I don't think I think you would struggle to find a Brit who had the fucking balls to be like, he's not a hero. He's just doing his fucking job. But so like publicly, they might not really care or
Okay.
think or even think about the military. But like, if you were just to ambush him with the question, what do you think of the military? Oh yeah, good lads, great job, heroes, whatever. Just to get by
Right.
politely in public. But I don't think anyone. There's not the same like tears into my like salty tears into my flag as I think about the sacrifice our brave boys are doing over, in Afghan or any of that shit. It's
Sure.
it's it doesn't fucking exist like that.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was. I wonder if that was more common, uh,
back
say
in the
100
day.
years ago. Yeah, the U.S. is kind of. I mean, it's debatable, but vaguely, we're kind of in a somewhat colonial era. Not exactly, but kind of on the end of it. Whereas Britain was in this position, maybe 100 years ago or whatever. I wonder if there was a similar attitude back then,
Mm.
or, I don't know. Obviously, 100 years ago, you can't speak to. So, with
not
personal
not not very
experience.
well. No.
Oh. Huh. Let's see.
Anything we've neglected so far?
Probably. I always remember stuff afterward. This is it's kind of a fly by the seat of the pants thing, but then later on you have the ability to judge yourself and be like, "Well, hey, I missed that," or
Oh yeah.
whatnot. So it's like,
My the most important question I had for a guest, or more the second most important I'll have for a guest, I fucking forget. And I'll be listening, I'll edit afterwards, and I'm like, God damn
right,
it, that would have been a great
right,
spot.
yeah, exactly.
Like, why do you think he has so many repeat guests? Because I
Yeah.
forget shit.
Yeah, no kidding. No, well, yeah. I mean, on that point, one question I do like to ask every guest is, if a kid was to ask you for advice about joining the military, what would be your response?
So I've had the good fortune over the last few years where I've been, talking about this kind of thing, to talk to a lot of kids who've considered the military for all sorts of different reasons. Different from my own, very scarily similar to my own.
Mm,
I first off, my blunt advice would be don't join the military,
yeah,
and let's not go at it from like a political perspective, but just for an individual perspective. I mean, you're at the start of your life. You have so much potential, and we've all waited at the DMV or some government office for something,
yeah, yeah,
and just had a shitty fucking experience. And you're 18 to 20. You're full of life. You got so much ahead of you. Why would you want to be waiting at the DMV for the next 4 to 8 years of your life?
mm-hmm. Right,
Like,
right,
and I don't mean that just as a joke. It's funny, but like, do you trust the best, fittest, like most active and eager years of your life to a government institution? I
sure,
mean,
yep,
personally, I'm very fucking glad I decided not to. But so many people do, and so many they. So instead of here's what I did.
yep,
instead of going through with it, in the end, I realized there's so much I want to do, and the military would be holding me back from doing so much. I would have to circle back and catch up with so many of my desires
sure,
in 4 years, at least. And God knows if I would have the ability or the drive to do these things then. And it's like,
sure,
well, I have this desire and this passion to travel, to live in certain places, to get a head start on my career. All of these things that I want to get done now, and not when I'm like mid-20s or something, and just getting my
sure,
first proper civilian job or whatever.
right,
That kind of
right,
thing, and it's a terrifying reality so many vets face when they come out. So that was a big part for one. I'm trying to when I typed this out, I had a pretty good answer, I feel. But so my the big thing I came to realize as I was going through my training and having the kind of headbutting and realizing it wasn't, I wasn't passionate about this the same way I would be living my own life on my own terms. I was like, all right, well, what did I want out of this? And for some people, it's like the training, traveling, meeting new people, finding your tribe, like I was talking about. You just have to decide to pursue those things outside
mm,
of the military with the same determination you have for joining up, and you'll be so much more significantly happy. Like,
sure,
instead of I the Bite and the Bullet boys share all sorts of memes on like guys asking for leave and their commander just shitting down their neck, and you're like,
right,
it's for my sister's wedding. Fuck you.
Right, right.
And you're like, Jesus.
And that's the
Like,
reality you live in.
yeah, and
Yeah. It's funny
so
because it's true.
yeah, it sucks, and so many people think they like what I would say to a kid. So many people think they need the military to be like to define them, to be that guy who had that experience and knows those
Mm,
things. Guess
as
what?
validation.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time at Sandhurst rucking, carrying a rifle, and being fucking miserable and cold. You know what I did last weekend? I went out rucking
Right.
with a rifle, trudging like 12 miles with some mates, cold and miserable. And you know what?
Right.
At the end of it,
Right.
I went home and did my own thing. And
Yep.
so for a lot of guys in this country, like they want that training to kind of for Second Amendment guys, they want that real military training. Fucking do it on your own time. If you want to find
Sure.
your own tribe, you'll do a lot better pursuing it. Via your own interests, via your own, local community, whatever it might be. There's so many things people go looking for in the military that just either aren't there, or it's just, it's like a fucked up version of what you could be doing on your own time anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
so you really have to think
Sure.
of, like a lot of guys, people who are listening to this and are like, well, I want to join because it's my duty or whatever. I'm not gonna. Those guys have to figure it out for themselves. But for people who want those more less the duty side of things and more just the experience of it, and they want that to be a part of their lives, you can do so much of that on your own time. Honestly, to a greater extent, and you won't have to sit through any rape prevention seminars or
Right.
or like hours mopping rain or like
Right.
hallways your mates vomited down. Like you can be a young person living your life doing all the things you would be doing in the military and
Right.
still live your life, still get that early head start and have those experiences while being shipped off to a place you have no interest in being, shipped off to a war you might not necessarily care about.
Sure.
There's and from the military kid perspective, if you have a family, if you're thinking about joining up to support a family, or you want to have a family while you're in, there's so many events my dad missed out on because he was
Mm,
away. And
sure.
we're fortunate. We're a rare case where it didn't really fuck up our family, where we kept a good bond through that. But some people, like, I mean, even though I have a good relationship with him, it definitely has had a fucking effect on me. Like,
Right. Well, and it
eh,
seems to me, it seems unusual that even as a young kid you would be able to assign the responsibility for your dad's absence to the military as opposed to your dad.
well,
Like
it's
you hear about kids who are in say a marriage where a divorce happens, or actually a better example where a parent dies. A lot of
mm,
times those kids just transfer a lot of anger to the parent, even though
yeah,
it was not their fault at all. So for you as a kid to be able to say, my dad's not here and it's the military's fault, or rather, the military's responsible,
yeah,
instead of being angry at your father, that I think that's pretty unusual
yeah. I guess I was lucky to
and
kind
probably
of.
helped your
Oh,
family
for sure.
relationship. Yeah.
I think he explained it in a good way at the time. Like, I'm being sent away to Afghan or whatever the fuck it was at the time,
Sure.
Kuwait,
Sure.
and yeah. So,
Hmm.
but I don't know, for young guys thinking of joining, for thinking of doing that military lifestyle, like there's a lot of things to consider. I'm not gonna, I'm not your mom, not your dad.
Right. Right.
I'm not gonna grab your collar and be like, don't you dare join the military. But like, all I can say is sincerely, please consider all those things and all the things in your life you want to do with your youth. For one, I mean, so many people, they get out and they're just like, oh well, what the fuck, I have to start my life now.
Right.
They've lived a life, they've made friends and shit, had experiences, seen places, but they could have done it differently. And so many of the people that both of us chat with, they say they would have done it different given a second chance.
Right.
and
Huh.
and having so many people go gung-ho into the military not considering these things. But it's the age of information. You have access to so many stories like the ones that you were putting out with these interviews with people, and so many others, sharing their experiences. So there's a lot of information to sift through, and I advise in taking as much of that as possible before making that decision, as opposed to just reading the pamphlet you're handed.
Right. Well, yeah. So as a gun guy, SA-80, a mistake or a great invention?
Not just a mistake, an abomination.
Okay.
No, I would.
Just because it's a
What?
bullpup, or
No,
what?
I actually don't mind bullpups, but that might just be my weird Eurotrashiness. But
Sure.
I would own an SA-80, but it would be like, I mean, I'm not gonna hate fuck the rifle, but it would hate shoot perhaps.
Oh, okay.
So
Sure.
even the fucking Germans couldn't fix it. It's still a piece of shit. It's like the amount of times that fucking thing cut me. It's 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 a piece of shit. And the LSAT scope you use, it's
Okay.
like it's a gun designed by a culture that doesn't understand weapons
Sure.
because they've been removed from them for so long, made for people who didn't grow up shooting. It's alien
Right.
tech, and ugh. I have an AR for a reason.
Sure. Yeah.
But
So
I
if
don't know.
you could have any bullpup, what would your choice be?
Someone just
your
messaged
favorite?
me this the other day. It was
Okay.
Smokey the Appalachistani, but he
Oh
he was
yeah.
asking my opinion on that, and so from what I've shot, I would I like Tavors. I like
Okay. Sure.
not sure about supporting IWI, but I that's a rabbit hole. But
Yeah.
no, I'd have a Tavor for sure,
Okay.
and or a an Org, the Austrian
Oh yeah.
bullpup.
Yeah. Not the
Um,
French one, the Clarion, the Bugle, or whatever they call it.
the
That's pretty old, I guess.
FAMAS. Well,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot
There you go.
the Org's old too, so the SAA is pretty old.
That's true. That's true.
Bullpups have been around a minute now, a few decades. So many
Yep.
Americans flip out when you talk about bullpups, but it's just manual of arms. If you can get that shit down, it's just like anything else. But so many people are fussy.
Sure.
The reload's weird. Shut the fuck up. The trigger's mushy. Yeah, weird. Fuck off.
Oh.
I'm not fussy. If
Right.
it goes bang, like I'm not fussy, and I still hate the SA-80. So
Sure.
that's what
Sure.
that abomination is. But and another thing about weapons training at Sandhurst, I had a color sergeant. I don't know what that equates to in terms of like E4, E5, E6, but
Oh, okay.
um,
That's a rank
but
though.
yeah, color sergeant. Like
Okay.
it's weird. Different corps will have different like slightly different NCO ranks sometimes. Like a few corps have like
Sure.
a different name for. Oh, and yeah, I've always said lieutenant, but in Britain it's lieutenant.
Oh,
Weird
I thought
shit
it
like
was
that.
lieutenant. Isn't it lieutenant over? Oh no, never mind. That's Germany.
Lieutenant? Ooh, that's ooh,
I don't know.
das
Accent's
ist nicht
bad.
gut.
Yeah.
But so this color sergeant when I was getting so our sidearm, one of the few sensible things the British military do is their sidearms a Glock 17
Oh, sure. Yeah.
instead of a fucking SIG or whatever we're trying to do over here. But so my color sergeant, he was instructing us on how to take down a Glock, take the slide off. He couldn't fucking do it because he's been around a while, and the British military's only recently, I say recently, like last decade or so, transitioned to I guess it's been like 6 years since I did all my stuff now, but they've only recently transitioned to, at the time they'd only recently transitioned to Glocks
Okay. Sure.
from high powers, or maybe it was a SIG.
Mm,
They've gone through like a few small arms recently.
yeah, it could have been a SIG, but yeah, high power sounds right for sure.
Yeah, but I think they were like experimenting with SIGs, and then decided to like standardize to Glocks. But he was going over like how to take it apart. He's just trying to rip the slide off with these big gorilla arms of his because he can't figure out how to release it.
Right.
Piece of shit plastic gun. I'm like, fuck, this is the standard we're being trained by. Like, a lot of my instructors were good, and he was good on everything else, but he just didn't have a fucking clue about that. It's like, oh, we were all
Right.
well. Most people were just looking at him like, oh, it's just a piece of shit. But I was sitting there like, dude, just pull the fucking tabs, please.
Right.
Yeah, so
That's funny.
But,
Yeah, I've so you're the first Brit I've had on the show, obviously. Did you play rugby at all growing up?
yeah. In
Or
school,
more of a soccer guy.
Nah, I never really cared for football, but
Excuse me. Yes, football.
football. No, I always enjoyed rugby more. I wasn't like I was never the guy destroying people, but definitely definitely a preferred sport. Plus, it's like just less bullshit. Oh, yellow card, red card. It's like, your ear's hanging off by a strand, but you're good to play.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I like the how it. I think it's a really good combination of individual effort and team effort.
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of opportunity for an individual. When you got ball in hand, you're the decision maker. You're running out front. You have a lot of ability to make an individual decision that affects the team, but there's also that team responsibility of supporting the runner and contributing to the overall effort. So, anyways,
I've always enjoyed it. No, I've always enjoyed it a lot more than American football because it feels a lot more organic with kind of how plays work. Like, it feels more kind of that, tribal people working together and just instantly making decisions instead of like, all right, guys, here's the plan, and drawing it all out. It's a little bit more faster than that. I don't know. I'm biased, but
right. Yeah,
I have a lot more fun watching rugby than I do American football.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. You got anything to obviously you got several things to plug. Aside from I mentioned in the intro, but in case someone missed it, the glorious artwork for the show is a product of your intellectual genius.
And, I loved working on that. That was a fun little project.
It gives me something to aspire to when I'm, especially in the early days of the show before I had many recordings and hadn't published anything. I was like, you get down, you're like, is anybody gonna listen to this? It's a dumb waste of time. And then I had the artwork on my phone screen, and I'd open up my phone and be like, this is what I need to aspire to. Like, this is a target for for the goal of excellence. So it was pretty cool inspiration.
You invested in yourself from the start. You wanted legit artwork. I was like, respect. A lot of guys will just whip up some MS Paint or like some app artwork that looks generic as fuck, and you're like, yep, another person who's made a podcast during the pandemic. But no, like the weight of these stories. But also like the whole military experience is as serious as it can be. It's also so fucking loony wherever you find yourself in the machine. So it was cool trying to find that tone of the artwork. Not to go like full art school on you, but it was fun.
Yeah. So what you got?
All right. So if you want to listen to my ramblings, you can find me both on the E-Militia podcast. So that's like email, E-Militia, where we've got like 70 plus episodes covering all sorts of things from 3D printing guns, interviewing all sorts of liberty-centric figures, talking about government and government tyranny. So all sorts of stuff on there. I do that with a host of, or a group of hosts across the States. And we had one other British host, but he's been a lazy fuck and hasn't been on in a minute. I gotta call him out. And then my solo show, I do that. I try and do it once a week. The BR Hates Fed show. Again, very much anti-government kind of stuff. If that's
if you couldn't tell from the title.
Yeah. If you get, or my general demeanor on this podcast, but
Right.
letting it slip through just a tiny bit.
Right.
But yeah, I talk about all sorts on there. Kind of also more like a weekly news show, but a bit more chilled out. I talk about everything from gun rights to psychedelics. So big mixed bag. And then also, because I keep myself busy because I hate having free time, I run a Substack. So that's the Anarch, so anarchist without the IST at the end, .substack.com. And I've been working with a handful of other writers, kind of putting together articles, talking less about kind of less libertarian confirmation bias articles and more about the culture, the general culture of liberty and things going on, things like homesteading knowledge and
Mm,
communal events and that protests, that kind of thing. So
yeah. More not timeless, but less date specific. Like you were saying, your BR Hates Fed show is more a lot of
more weekly
news.
news,
Yeah,
yeah.
whereas Anarch has a longer expiration date, I guess.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
more like a journal, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, trying to. Oh, and then just got so much shit I work on. Uh, Last thing I'll plug is the Art and War podcast. That might be a bit more on brand for your the bulk of your listeners.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I produced that with Seaburn and Mitch and Nathan, and they both so Mitch, he's currently active duty U.S. Army, about to get out, and then Nathan is former Canadian military, so we have the full trifecta
Right.
of types. And they talk about military experience, kind of more firearms industry stuff, generalized tactics, firearm industry artwork and stuff like that. And they've had a number of pretty fucking killer guests as of late. Grantham, all the T-Rex Arms people, um, a friend of the community, Pat Watson, Uncensored Tactical. Lots of good people with very relevant experience in the military.
Yeah.
Kind of a similar vibe to your show, but yours is very much more. I think a lot of those guys, they now have a platform. So, like I was saying at the start of this, they
Right.
talk more to their experience as educators and that kind of thing, less to their unique experiences in the military, like you do. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's all I got, man.
Thank you for listening to this episode of How I Embraced the Suck. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend. And as my Girl Scout den mother used to say, stay frosty.
No, I love that. I love that because I was definitely that kid. The one point at an airplane, asked about a rifle, whatever it might be, and that's what led me into all of this, especially being in Britain.